what really happened in America's past. We break it down one story at a time. Welcome to USA History Lane. Every major conflict has a beginning, but the story between the United States and Iran did not start with war or even hatred. It started with cooperation, trust, and with a decision that would quietly shape decades of anger. In the early 1900s, Iran was not the powerful, defiant country we'll think of today. It was weak, divided, and heavily influenced by foreign powers, especially Britain, which controlled much of Iran's oil. Then came a man who changed everything. His name was Mohammad Mosaddegh. He was not a dictator, he was democratically elected, and in 1951, he made a bold move that shocked the world. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, taking it back from control. To many Iranians, this was justice. To Britain, it was threat. And to the United States, it was dangerous. At the time, the Cold War was intensifying. The US feared that any instability in Iran could open the door to Soviet influence. Oil, geography, and politics were all at stake. So instead of supporting democracy, the US made a secret decision: remove Mossadegh. In 1953, the CIA, working with British intelligence, launched Operation Ajax, a covert plan to overthrow Iran's government. They funded protests, they spread propaganda. They even paid groups to create chaos in the streets. And it worked. Mossadegh was arrested. A new government was installed, and the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was put back in power with strong American support. On the surface, it looked like stability, but underneath, something dangerous had begun, because the Iranian people did not forget. For the next 25 years, the Shah ruled Iran as a powerful monarch, backed by the United States. He modernized the country, built infrastructure, strengthened the military, but he also ruled with fear. His secret police, Savak, suppressed opposition, imprisoned critics, and crushed dissent, and many Iranians began to see him not as their leader, but America's. The resentment grew slowly, quiet, like pressure building underground. And then, in 1979, everything exploded. Millions of Iranians took to the streets. Protests turned into revolution. The Shah, once protected by the United States, fled the country. And a new leader emerged, Ayatollah Khomeini. But this was not just a change in leadership. It was a complete rejection of everything the US had supported. Soon after, anger turned into action. Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran. They took 52 Americans hostage and held them for 444 days. For Americans watching on television, it was shocking. But for many Iranians, it was revenge. Revenge for 1953. Revenge for decades of interference. Revenge for a government they never chose. This was the moment everything changed. The moment allies became enemies. And the moment trust turned into something much harder to undo. When the Shah fell in 1979, the world did not just witness a political shift. It witnessed the birth of a completely new kind of government. At the center of it was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a religious leader who had spent years in exile, criticizing both the Shah and the United States. When he returned to Iran, millions welcomed him. But what he built was not a democracy. It was an Islamic Republic, where religion and government became one, and where America was no longer seen as a partner, but as an enemy. Khomeini called the United States the Great Satan. And for many Iranians, especially after the 1953 coup, that message resonated. Then came the moment that locked the hostility in place. In November 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the US embassy in Tehran. They took 52 Americans hostage. This became known as the Iran hostage crisis. For 444 days, the world watched. Every night, Americans saw images of blindfolded hostages, angry crowds burning flags. And inside Iran, the crisis strengthened the new regime. It united people against a common enemy. It made compromise almost impossible. The United States responded with sanctions, freezing Iranian assets and cutting ties. Trust was gone, but the conflict did not stop there. Because while the US was dealing with the hostage crisis, something even bigger was unfolding. In 1980, Iraq invaded Iran. This started the Iran-Iraq War, one of the longest and deadliest wars in the region. And here is where things get complicated. The United States, still angry at Iran, quietly supported Iraq. Even though Iraq was led by Saddam Hussein, a dictator, even though chemical weapons were used during the war, the logic was simple. Iran had to be contained. For Iran, this confirmed everything they believed, that the US was not just an enemy, but a dangerous one. Hundreds of thousands died in that war. Cities were destroyed, and the hatred between Iran and the US grew even deeper. Then came another shocking moment. In 1988, a US Navy ship, the USS Vincennes, shot down an Iranian passenger plane, killing 290 civilians. The US said it was a mistake. Iran saw it as proof of hostility. Again, trust collapsed further. But the real shift in strategy came after the war ended. Iran realized it could not match the United States in direct military power, so it changed tactics. Instead of fighting openly, it began building influence across the Middle East. This meant supporting groups outside its borders. In Lebanon, Iran backed Hezbollah. In later years, it would support proxy forces in Iraq, Syria, and beyond. This was the beginning of what many now call shadow war, conflict without formal declarations, without clear battle lines, just influence, alliances, and quiet escalation. Meanwhile, the United States tightened sanctions, economic pressure increased, and both sides became more entrenched in their positions. By the 1990s, something had become clear. This was no longer just about one event, not just the coup, not just the hostage crisis, not the war. It was now cycle, action, reaction, pressure, retaliation, and neither side willing to step back first. By the 1990s, the hostility between the United States and Iran had become more than historical grudges. It had evolved into a strategy, a long game of containment, influence, and silent warfare. The world had witnessed the 1953 coup, the Shah's oppressive rule, the 1979 revolution, the hostage crisis, and the Iran-Iraq war. But now the rivalry had entered a subtler, more insidious phase. The US, determined to prevent Iran from becoming a regional power, implemented a series of economic and political sanctions. In 1995, President Bill Clinton signed Executive Order 12957, effectively banning US investment in Iran's energy sector. These sanctions were designed to weaken Iran's economy and curtail its ability to fund proxy groups abroad. By targeting trade, finance, and technology, the United States aimed to isolate Iran on the global stage without direct military confrontation. For Iran, these sanctions were perceived not just as economic pressure, but as a continuation of decades of foreign aggression. Counterbalance US influence, Iran expanded its reach in the Middle East through proxy groups. Hezbollah in Lebanon, already established during the 1980s, became a central tool in Iran's strategy, capable of striking Israeli targets and influencing regional politics. Similarly, Iran developed alliances with militant groups in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, creating a network of influence that made any direct attack by the United States increasingly risky. During the 1990s, another arena emerged where the US and Iran clashed: intelligence and covert operations. Both nations engaged in clandestine acts of sabotage, surveillance, and assassination. High-profile incidents, such as the mysterious deaths of Iranian nuclear scientists, underscored the deadly stakes. Although neither side admitted responsibility, multiple sources, including investigative journalism and intelligence reports, suggest these operations were part of a deliberate effort to slow Iran's nuclear development and weaken its regional power. In parallel, Iran's ambitions to expand its nuclear capabilities became a central concern for the United States. While Iran insisted its nuclear program was for peaceful energy purposes, intelligence reports indicated progress toward uranium enrichment, potentially for weaponization. This development drew the attention of not just Washington, but also Israel and other Western allies. The stakes were no longer just regional. They were global. By the early 2000s, tensions escalated. The US, in response to the 9/11 attacks, invaded Afghanistan and then Iraq. These interventions put American forces in direct proximity to Iranian influence. Iran capitalized on the instability in Iraq, supporting Shia militias and exerting considerable political influence over the new Iraqi government. This was a masterclass in indirect strategy. Iran could expand power without direct confrontation, while the US found itself in prolonged conflicts that drained resources and focus. One of the most dramatic moments of shadow warfare occurred in 2007 with Operation Olympic Games, a covert cyber campaign that targeted Iran's nuclear facilities. The Stuxnet virus, one of the first cyber weapons designed to physically damage industrial equipment, disrupted uranium enrichment centrifuges, delaying Iran's nuclear program. This operation marked a shift. The war between the US and Iran was no longer just conventional. It had entered the digital age. As the cyber war unfolded, Both sides engaged in a complex mix of diplomacy and threats. Presidents and foreign ministers met for negotiations, while at the same time intelligence agencies conducted clandestine operations across multiple countries. Every assassination, every airstrike on weapons shipments, every intercepted shipment of advanced technology contributed to a growing web of mistrust and retaliation. It wasn't just about nuclear weapons. Iran's influence in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, as well as its support for anti-US and anti-Israel groups, became central points of conflict. The US conducted drone strikes and special operations targeting key figures, while Iran responded by arming militias and strengthening alliances. The proxy wars, though indirect, carried deadly consequences and kept the tension simmering. By the end of the 2000s, it was clear the rivalry had matured into a war without borders, fought through proxies, cyber attacks, and covert operations. Neither country wanted full-scale war, but neither could afford to show weakness. Each move, each decision carried the weight of decades of history, ideology, and revenge. The world watched, often unaware that these invisible conflicts were shaping global security. Ships in the Persian Gulf were targeted, critical infrastructure was sabotaged, and every assassination or strike became a message to the other side. This was a new kind of warfare, shadow war, where every action was deliberate, every reaction calculated, and every step avoided open conflict, yet the stakes remained existential.